So it's lesson 3, cloudy September day. And so today we're going to focus on views and view syntax, but then we're also going to get set up and configured with the database that we're going to be using. We're actually going to be using 2 databases, one for our in-class project, and then a second one where we can walk through the process of how you're going to set up the database for your assignment using the Microsoft Azure Cloud Platform. So I've already marked everybody's assignment 1. Yes, I set a record. You submitted them by 5 o'clock yesterday. You've already got your marks. I've also marked the weekly learning activity, the discussion board post we had from last week. And I'll come back and talk about that a little bit more. So what are we doing today? I'm going to go over assignment 2, give out all the requirements. I'll show you a sample project of a really well done submission from last year in this class, and take any questions you have. So that assignment is due at the end of the long weekend. Okay. So on Monday, the 11th. Then we're going to spend some time experimenting with Razor View syntax. We're going to have another little learning activity that is graded, much like your discussion board post, although I'm going to actually give you time to do this activity in class. If you're watching the video after class, that's fine. You can do that. You can still submit the activity on your own, as long as you submit it by next Monday at 5 p.m. And then we're going to just look at setting up our database. I think a lot of you probably have the software already, but I will go over it and how to use it, and what our database setup looks like. One other thing I just want to point out, because I had an email conversation with a student around this, please make sure you pay attention to the checklist at the end of each folder, because it tells you exactly everything you need to do before last class and also where to find things. So I had a student say, I didn't know where the quiz was, but all they really had to do was look in the checklist, because the checklist, I'm telling you where things are. And again, if you have any issue finding something on Blackboard and you can't find it, I try to make the instructions clear, but if you can't find it, please email me and I can point you in the right direction. If you're looking for an item and you can't seem to find it, let me know. Again, probably best you don't leave things to the last minute so that you have time to reach out to me and get an answer if you're looking for something that you need, that you're having trouble finding. Okay, so let's talk about assignment 2. So it is now posted to Blackboard. Here it is, and we'll go over the requirements. So assignment 2 is you creating the basic implementation of the project plan that you submitted for assignment 1. Okay? So you are going to create your new .NET Core MVC web application with C#. You're going to connect it up to your SQL Server database to perform CRUD operations. We talk about CRUD a lot. What is CRUD? What does it mean? Programming acronym all developers need to know. That's right. Thank you, Scott. So CRUD is, and thanks, Mahir, create, read, update, and delete. So thanks, Gerline. So yeah, so no matter what your application idea, your proposal is, you're not just going to submit a static website. Your website is going to interact with the database and users can create, read, update, and delete data. The assignment's worth 15% of your grade. And as I said, it's due Monday, October the 11th. So we just take a quick look at our calendar and where we are here. So where are we? Okay. So we've got the 21st. You basically have 3 weeks to do it, which is plenty of time. So today we're going to work on views. Next week's class, we're going to actually work with the database and start building the CRUD functionality. Then we're going to do some customization. Oops. On October 5th. It's not due till the end of Thanksgiving. So that is lots of time. You actually have to write very little code of your own in order to get the application to work. Visual Studio is going to write most of the code for you for the assignment. Okay, so 3 weeks is plenty of time to get this assignment done. So how do you submit? On Blackboard, I only need 2 things. Submit your GitHub link again, and you just use the same link that you used for assignment 1. And you're also going to give me a link to the live site. So you're going to publish your website on Azure. We'll look at doing that probably next week. So you're just going to give me 2 URLs. Here's my GitHub URL. Here's my live site URL. So you must do this assignment by yourself, okay? You can't work with a classmate. You can't get someone else to do it for you. You can't take code off the internet and submit it. You must do your own work, or you will get a minimum penalty of 0 on your assignment. Okay? So if your submission looks very similar to someone else's code, we're going to have a conversation around it. Okay? And again, asking everybody to create their own unique project is partly designed. This should help prevent this. If your application is different from everybody else's, it's a lot, doesn't make really sense for you to borrow code or share code from someone else. So when I go to mark them, if I have concerns about your assignment, I will send you a meeting request for a one-on-one WebEx meeting where I'll ask you to maybe walk me through your project and answer some questions to ensure that you did the work. Okay. Please do not just download the work we're doing in class on Tuesdays, change some of the words around and submit it back to me. I know my own code when I see it, so I don't want to mark my own work and give a student a grade for it. Okay. You can, of course, look at my GitHub repository as a reference. That's what it's there for. It's there as a learning tool. Now, can you use code you find online? Yes, you can, but subject to, I think, reasonable limits. Okay. So if you find some code that you want, I ask you to do a few things. Okay. Make a comment. Don't claim the code is your own if you found it online. Put in a link to where you found it, number 1. Number 2, it can't be more than 10% of the project. So it's fine to take a little piece of code online to enhance the functionality of your site. That's fine. But you can't copy like an entire tutorial and submit it as your own. And probably most important, before you do this, you should send the link to me and say, hey, Rich, I found this code on this website. I think it would help my project. Is it okay if I use it? So just clear it with me first before you do that. Okay, but perfectly reasonable. Yeah, perfectly reasonable to use code you find online so long as you check with me first and it follows these guidelines. So we'll look at the specific requirements and then I'll show you an example, which I think will help highlight for you what it is I'm looking for. So you're going to build a new project based on the plan you submitted for assignment 1. If you decide to change your idea, let's say I've already marked your assignment 1. So Scott's making a book tracker and Scott decides, you know what, I don't want to do this. I want to do something else. Please email me and get your new idea approved in that case. So you're going to create a new project using the same options that we've used the last 2 weeks in class. So we're going to pick .NET Core, ASP.NET Core, MVC Web Application. Make sure you enable individual user accounts for authentication. Sorry, this should say for assignment 3. I'll update the document. Because we're going to you don't need those accounts in assignment 2, but we are for the next part of the assignment. You're going to set up and connect to an SQL Server database in the Azure cloud. I will upload a new version of the document. So you cannot use a local database for the assignment. You can use a local database for our in-class application, but your assignment must be hosted in the cloud. So that means both the web app and the SQL Server database have to be running in Azure. You're going to generate model classes with corresponding database tables. So we generated 1 model last week. You're going to need to make a minimum of 2 models in your project. And then we're going to use a neat tool in Visual Studio called a migration. What migrations do is we'll work with these next week in class. They allow us to build model classes in Visual Studio, and then with a simple command, Visual Studio will generate tables in our database that match our classes. So we don't have to create all our classes and then go ahead and create all the database tables. We can just create the classes and auto-generate the tables in our database. So again, this saves time and it improves accuracy. We'll do this together in class next week. And then we're going to use some code generation tools. Again, we're going to use those in class next week. Visual Studio is basically going to build your controllers and views for you. You don't have to build them yourself. You might make some small adjustments to them to enhance them, but you don't have to write 90% of that code. Visual Studio is going to create for you. You should add some comments where applicable in your code. So you're going to create the new application. You're going to have at least 2 models, and there should be at least one one-to-many relationship in the database. So the models need to be related. So for example, again, Scott, I'm going to just stick with your suggested project. You know, you might have a book model and an author model, and there will be a relationship that one author can have one or more books, and one book, let's just say, can have one author. Or you could make it a many-to-many relationship if you wanted. So you can't have 2 totally unrelated models. There has to be some kind of connection between them. I know one person had suggested making a to-do list, and that I approve that project idea, but keep in mind you'll need something other than just a simple to-do. You'll need a second model where there's some kind of relationship between them. Maybe you're going to have, like a task type or a category. Cupcake model is excellent, so long as it's related. Your tables will also have to have automatically assigned primary key values. And we'll look at how to set that up next week. You're then going to use the MVC scaffolding tool. So this is the code generation tool in Visual Studio. It's going to build the controllers and views that have all the code and HTML for performing CRUD operations. In your site template, you're going to add links to the index views in your controllers. So again, Scott might have a books link and an authors link. So you'll need to add those links manually. You'll want to add a descriptive name in the navigation bar and in the page title. You're going to modify the footer to include your name, your student number, the course name, and code. And then you'll want to rewrite the text that's on the home page to properly describe your site. You'll need to commit regularly to GitHub. So for full marks, you must make a minimum of 4 commits, and they have to be on at least 2 calendar days. So if all 4 of your commits are made on the last day, you won't get full marks. Because the idea is you're using GitHub to work on the project incrementally and commit as you work. You also need a Readme file. We will build that today or next week. And then you're going to publish your site to Azure and include the link in your Readme file as well as on Blackboard. There are 2 opportunities for bonus marks. Number 1, customize the theme by adding your own CSS, or you can go and find an open source CSS library, so long as you reference where you got it, and include it. Okay. Now, customizing the theme doesn't mean I'm going to change one color and change the font and I'm done. Okay. That's not really worthy of a bonus mark. Bonus number 2 is add any additional advanced MVC feature that you learn independently that we do not cover in class. And if you do this, please list it in the README file so I know what that feature is that I'm looking for. Okay? So your assignment is out of 24. There's a detailed rubric, detailed breakdown of how it will be marked. So I will mark you in each component. I'm not just going to give you an overall grade. You'll see exactly the grade breakdown. And if you lose marks in any section, I will include feedback as to why you didn't get full marks or what was missing. Now I will show you a sample project from last year, and then I'll be happy to take any questions. So this student built a recipe site. I think somebody in the class may be building a similar one this semester, which is fine. So she got some bonus marks here. She she changed the font. She modified the color scheme, created a logo of her own. She customized the homepage to explain what the site is, put her name and student number in the footer. She's also linked to her private Git repository. So her two models, she had a category model. So we could add, edit, and delete categories. So I could add, edit, and delete things. I could view recipes. I could go and add a recipe. I can put in a description, and it will add. So she also figured out how to do, for example, a file upload, incorporated it in here. So this was basically a complete assignment. So she modified the nav bar so I could get to the recipe index or the category index, and I could add, edit, and delete data in both. And there is a relationship between the two, right? When I'm adding a recipe, I automatically get a drop down where I can assign it to category. Yeah, she was a great student. She's now working as she's graduated and is working she did a co-op with a local web company, and they've now hired her full-time to actually be a project manager. So her Git repository looks like this. So here's the Readme file. She described what the site is. So again, the Readme file is also helpful because, she could show this project. She could show this project when she was out job hunting. And it says, here's my code. Here's what the project does. She linked, the site's offline. The live site I don't think is running anymore because you only get a certain amount of free Azure credits. So I don't think the live site is actually active. Oh. Okay, this is actually someone else's project now who's used that URL. So we'll build this README file, and then I can see from her commit history, so this shows all of the changes and all of the updates as she worked on it, with descriptive messages of all the changes. So this is basically what I'm looking for your project, that you have the working create, read, update, and delete functionality integrated with your SQL Server. And you've kind of customized the site so you've made it your own. It doesn't just look like the template that Visual Studio generates for us. Okay, so whatever idea you've submitted for assignment 1, assignment 2 is making that site a reality. Um, Okay, Attila, yeah, can you put the link in the chat and I can open it? If you put the link or send me the link, I can open it up and I can show that as well. We'll also make a README file for our in-class project. But sure, Attila, I'm happy to show yours as well. So Attila has done an excellent job here explaining what this project is and some of the features as well. So this is a great README file. So Attila, you've pretty much done the README file already. The only thing that you'll want to add to it eventually is once you publish the site to Azure, you'll also want to include a link to the live website. So if someone's looking at your code, they can then click it and see the live project. But this is excellent. Thanks for sharing. So the README file should describe the project to someone who doesn't know about it and give them some information about how it's put together. This is really well organized, really well done. So we can make a README file for our in-class project today. Any questions at all about the requirements? Is there anything in the instructions that you're not clear about and you'd like clarification for? I'll just update the document on Blackboard because I made a few small edits to it. So I'll just upload the updated version. Well, Scott, that's the idea. I mean, I hope it is that you're getting something to build that you want to build and you get to make it your own. Okay, Attila, that's a great question. And one of the things, if you read the discussion board post from last week, one of the things I asked in the week 2 discussion board was, what do you most want to learn next about .NET? And the most common answer was, I want to learn how to integrate it with the database. So we will go over that next week. So fortunately, we can create the database on Azure, but we can still work in Visual Studio locally. So we can run our local web server and it can still connect and use the Azure database. Yeah, Marwa, I expect that no one knows about that yet. Yes. Yeah, we will look at that, Scott. So we'll look at how do we run it locally and then how do we deploy it to Azure. But we can use the Azure database in both instances. Okay, so we will be able to do that. We will also look, actually, I should just jump in because it's kind of relevant. If we just look at what things people said they wanted to learn, so as I said, the most common response was database. So you can look at what people said. So we will look at working with the database. We'll start setting it up this week, but we'll do the connection part next week. And we'll do both local and live. Several other people talked about customizing the views and the look, right? So how do we take what Visual Studio gives us and how do we make it our own? Now, we'll talk about integrating APIs. We will do that as well later in the course. Almost everything people said they want to learn, we're going to cover. So customizing the MVC, Shizato, we're going to do that in 2 weeks. So next week, we're going to get our database all set up and our controllers and views auto-generated. And then we're going to look at making the kinds of customizations that Rebecca made here. So how do we make a logo? How do we change the font? How do we change the CSS around? So we're going to do all of that in lesson 5. Authentication will start in lesson 6. Web APIs we will do towards the end of the term. How do we style it? Yeah, Jesse was asking, how do we add our own custom CSS? So we're going to do all these things in lesson 5. With styling, we will get to APIs at the end of the course. So we're going to do those as well. Okay, so pretty much everything that you said in the discussion board you want to cover, we're going to cover all of it. Any other questions about assignment 2? So you won't be able to do all of assignment 2 really until after next week's class, but you can at least start planning out what models you need. Manjinder, because I know you asked before we got started, when can we start the assignment? You can start building the model classes pretty much now. And we'll look at the database setup towards the end of class today. Okay, if something else comes up as we're progressing through today's lesson, I'll just minimize the document so we've got it open, so we can always come back and refer to it as needed. Okay, so let's open up our project from last week. What I want to focus on is Razor View syntax today. So we'll experiment a little bit in Visual Studio, and then I'm going to give you a little kind of lab learning activity that you're going to do in small groups. I'll give you time to do that. It's worth a few %. And then at the end of class, we'll look at our SQL Server setup. So let's fire up our project from last week. Okay, so let's open up our Global Grub project. It'll take us back here, and we want to get our site loading. So how do we do that? What do we do to kick off? Yep, you could hit F5 or start without debugging. Yep, if I would prefer Control F5 because F5 will start the debugger. Thanks, pal. Blah, and now. Okay, so we've got our page launched. Last week, we changed the privacy link in the header to say categories, and it loads the categories index. And we used our mock model so that we could browse any particular category. So we'll keep working with these files, but we're going to experiment. We've created some views, but so far we've just been creating empty views. So we're going to create a new view right now, but this time we're going to start to explore some of the different view templates that Visual Studio offers us. So let's go to our categories controller that we created last week, and we created a couple of methods in here. Well, the index method was already here, and then at the end of class last week, we used our category model that we created to make a list of 10 categories and pass it to the view. We also made the browse method that takes a string parameter, checks that the value is not null. If it is, we take the user back here. And if we have a category, we put it in the view bag and load the browse view. Right? So that gave us this functionality. I can click category 8. Category 8 value is passed as a URL parameter and then rendered in our view. So we created both the browse and index views last week. We created them as empty views. was index, and here was browse. And we just wrote the HTML in here. We're going to make a new method in here. What if we want to build an interface for users to add a new category? Let's make a new method. Again, it will return an iAction result, and we'll call it create. Okay, so our URL would be /categories/create. What should happen at this URL? We've talked about how .NET URLs, .NET MVC URLs tend to be descriptive. So with the URL localhost/categories/create, what should happen? What would you expect to see as the user if you went to this link? Okay, you should be able to create a new category. Yep. Okay, so Mangender, yeah, I agree, right? We want to create a new category, so we should see a form for this. So in here, yeah, within, exactly, Alex. Fatima, you're thinking the same thing, right? We want a form with input fields. So I'm going to show you how easy this is. So first of all, we're going to return a view. If we run the code right now, if I go to localhost/categories/create, what result do we expect in the browser if we try that? Yeah, we're going to get an error. Exactly. As Alex and Pahua and Jinder said, we're going to get an error because there's no view. So we can try it. We can go to categories/create. And again, my URL is not case sensitive. And we get unhandled exception. The view called create doesn't exist. So we're going to make this, but this time we're going to do it. We're not going to create an empty view. We're going to create something that's a little more developer friendly. So I'm going to right click my method name. I'm going to choose add view. Now, so far when we've created, I guess, 3 new views in this course. In the first week, we created an about view. Last week, we created the categories, index, and browse views. And each time we were using this option, this razor view empty. We're not actually going to use that now. An empty view is basically for just a static page where we're just putting the content and the HTML directly in the page. This time we want a razor view. It's not going to be empty. It's going to be with or without a strongly typed model. So I'm going to click add. And now we've got some options here. The view name defaults to create because we generated it from our create method. And now we have this option here. We could use an empty template without a model, but we've actually got 5 other options. I don't want it to be empty. Which page template should we pick here to make our form? You got it. We're going to pick the create template. That's right. Lots of people figured that. And now, that now enables the model class. So which model class should we pick? Yeah, we want to pick a category. The data context, this is a database connection class. We're not connected to the database yet, so we'll work with this next week, but we don't need it for today. We'll just leave it blank. I want to reference my script libraries so that any client-side JavaScript in the project is included. And then we've also got use a layout page. Now, we didn't really talk about this last week. I can actually uncheck this. I'll show you why. It says leave empty if set in a razor view start file. So I'm going to leave it empty. Okay, now that's fine. Don't worry about that for now. We're not using the data context today anyway. So It says, if it's set in a razor view start file, leave empty, which ours actually is. We didn't look at that file last week, but we'll look at it in a minute and see what the heck this means. So view name is create, template is also create, our model is category, and we'll reference our script libraries. So those are our options. Let's click add. So Visual Studio is scaffolding, it's generating code. Oh, okay, that didn't do quite what I wanted to. We'll take a look at it, but we're gonna have to delete it and redo it. That's okay. So I'm just gonna go back and refresh here. Oh, actually, I think first I have to recompile my project. And now we get a form. Where do these fields come from? How did it know? How did Visual Studio decide to give us a category ID input that's numeric and a name input that's a text? This didn't come out quite right, so I am going to change it, but we did, Elizabeth, yes, but where does it come from? Because we didn't specify category ID and name, did we? Right, Fatima. Thank you. Remember, we said that the model was our category class that we created last week. And that class has the properties ID and name. Now our layout got messed up, right? We don't have our bootstrap, we don't have our header, footer. I left the layout empty. That's odd that it was here. So we have this file, we didn't look at it. Came up in my class yesterday. We've got this view start file. So this defines the default layout. Yet I'm not sure why here it said our layout was null. So I'm actually going to regenerate this. We're going to do it again, but this time we need to pick our shared layout template. So I'm going to close the file. I'm actually going to delete it in my Solution Explorer. So go to Views and Categories. Let's delete Create CSHTML. We're going to regenerate it, but I missed picking the layout template, so we're going to do it again. That's okay, it just gives us more practice with it. So I'm going to right-click my method name again. I'm going to click Add View. I'm going to pick Razor View, Add. I'm going to choose Create and Category. This time I forgot. I need to pick, I should have checked off Use a Layout Page. Now we can browse to the layout file, but we don't need to. We can pick it, but that's the default, right? That view start sets that layout file as our default template. So if we don't specify which layout page to use, it will automatically use the one called _layout in the shared folder. So just make sure you check that last box and click Add. So notice now, so our model is category, and we get a form with an action of create, and we get two inputs, one for category ID and one for name. So the form is automatically mapped to the model class. Build again. So now our form is loading and it's got all of the rest of our It's got our CSS, it's got our header, our footer, it's got our whole layout. So creating new forms is pretty darn easy. And you'll notice, you'll remember last week, so we had our model, so our create. Let's take a look for a second. Let's compare. Look at line 1 on the new view we just created. We've got a model, globalgrub.models.category. We used this model declaration last week on the index view, and here it's similar at model, but we've got IEnumerable wrapping the class. How come these are different? Why does index use this IEnumerable, but create doesn't? They both reference the category class, but index is also using IEnumerable. I think there was a quiz question about IEnumerable. What does it mean? Right, Alex. So IEnumerable means it's a list or a collection that can be iterated, where there's an enumerator so we can loop through, which we're doing down here. So on our index view, we're working with a list of categories, but on the create view, we are only working with a single category. Now, our form works, but maybe let's look at, so if I click, maybe enter something, I don't know. I'm going to show you a couple of other things we can do with these auto-generated forms. The one thing I can do right now, which isn't ideal, is there's no validation here, right? So we have a working form. This is a starting point, but it's not really finished. So what changes, could you suggest any changes that we should make to this page? I could see several things we should probably modify. So the scaffolding gives us a working form. Yeah, we probably want to make sure that I can't do this. Thanks, Mahir. Yep. What else? Okay, yes, Manjinder, we would want to do that when we're actually working with the database. Yes. Yeah, we might want to make this even invisible. When we're working with the database, yeah, it probably shouldn't even be visible. It does, right. Okay, yeah, then we've only got an integer. Anything else you can see about this page that we should change? Now, that will actually happen automatically. Yeah, and we should make name required. Manjinder, we don't necessarily need it up here, but maybe we want to add a link here. Choose a category so we could add one here. Yeah, we should have a link to it. That's a good idea. Yeah, we'll want to require the name. Elizabeth, we will want to have it go somewhere. Yes, we probably won't do that today. Even our title is wonky. Notice the way that it generates the title. We get this H1 tag here that matches the method name, and then we've got the model name underneath. So even the headings are a little bit kind of messy. So we can make a few changes to the form that we built. So let's go and make a few modifications. First thing here is we've got these two headings, an H1 that says create and an H4 that says category. Why don't we just change this to say create a new category? I'm going to just take out that H4. So let's add the validation that people suggested. So it was suggested we shouldn't have negative numbers in the category ID, and it was suggested that name should be required. So Visual Studio has a really elegant system for doing this. We actually can set our validation rules up here in the model. And by applying validation rules on the model, any views that use that model will automatically inherit that validation. Text Danger is a bootstrap class, it's just a red font. So there's already a DOM object here used for displaying error messages. It's already here. So if we add some validation to the model, and we add bad data, that message is going to show up right here using the Bootstrap Text Danger class. So let's add a few rules. So above our category ID, we can add a range attribute. I think, yeah, so range would be from 0 to, let's say, this. So we're only going to accept category ID values inside this range. Now, Visual Studio is complaining we need to add a reference to the component model.data annotations class. So when I accept that reference, it adds this code on line 3, and now my range function with a min of, actually I want my min to be 1. No category IDs less than 1. Yeah, it's so easy to centralize this. So any view, we could have 500 views in this application that all use the category model. And this way, we don't have to write individual validation scripts on each view, which used to be incredibly time consuming for web developers. We had to write tons and tons of client-side JavaScript to validate each field one at a time. So this is actually using the jQuery unobtrusive validation library that comes with our template. So let's see what happens when we add this to category. So if I put in, oh, it thinks I have to build my project, build my solution. So as soon as I leave the field, it writes a validation error. You can see the text danger class, and it puts out a message. As soon as I fix my error and leave the field, the error goes away. So it's using jQuery for this. Same if I click create now. Oh, we'll deal with create. Yeah, it would take tons of time. Alex, if I showed you an old application, I should dig one out, a really old application I did, where you would not believe the amount of JavaScript we would write to validate our input forms. It took hours and hours and hours. You have to test it in all the browsers. So it's as simple as this. We could even customize the error message. So our min, our max. Let's see. Well, we'll just leave this one for now. So let's say we also want to make sure name cannot be null. We can just add a required annotation above name. My site recompiles. So now if I try to submit, it tells me name is required. As soon as I type something here, as soon as I key press, responds to the key press event using jQuery, and I cannot submit, right? The submit is disabled so long as there are any validation errors. And we can customize the message. So we'll say false to allowing empty strings. We can put our own error messages. So Elizabeth, that's what this parameter is. You can decide. If you say allow empty strings false, then no, I won't be able to. So I'm going to now customize my error message. Hang on, let's see, what did I do here? Oh, these are all optional parameters. So I can say allow empty strings is false, an error message equals. So this should now prevent empty strings like spaces. And I can customize, I can override the default error message. So now if I try to submit, I get my custom error message. If I type, it goes away. If I put in spaces, oh, I'm actually surprised. That doesn't seem to work. I don't know why. I'll have to look at that. So now we can build multiple views on our category model, but these validation rules will always apply globally. And we don't have to write the error messages. We don't have to build the view. This stuff's already here, right? We've already got. So this ASP4, it ties this input to the category ID property. And the ASP4 ties it to the name. I'm going to make one last small change and then we're going to take a break. There's one other very minor user interface problem with this page. Huh. Okay, that's good, Alex. We should change one other thing on here. What else should we change visually? One of the labels I suggest. Jesse, we could do that. Yeah, I also want to put a space in here. This is like a model property name. Yeah, let's put in a space. So there's two ways I can do it. I could change it here on the form. I could just hard code in. But if I do it in my model, I can set display. I can give it an alias in the model. This sets an alias for all labels globally. So rather than just putting a space on this one page, on the create page, if I set it in the model, any view bound to category, it's going to display this way with a space instead. Excuse me. So now I have a space here. Okay, so we've taken what Visual Studio auto generates, and then we have to polish it, right? We put in the validation we need, we clean up some of the user interface. And I would expect you'll do this in your project. You'll use Visual Studio to build the views, and then you're going to adjust them. to make them more polished, more usable, more functional. Okay, it is now 11:56, so we need to take a break. I'm going to push all my code to GitHub. So I'm going to go to Git Changes, just do lesson 3, part 1, create category view, model, annotations for validation. I'm going to commit and push my code. So everything we've done so far is on GitHub. I'm going to stop this recording and we will come back in 10 minutes.